Welcome. My name is Marie-Hélène Bernard, and I'm the Executive Director of the Handel and Haydn Society. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this lecture on J.S. Bach's Grand Passion. I would like to thank the Harvard University Department of Music for their assistance in planning and this lecture. We're absolutely delighted and grateful for their support. Tonight is very special. The Handel and Haydn Society is celebrating 200 years of existence this year in 2015. The actual birthday of H&H is this coming Tuesday, March 24th, which will be an H&H Day in Boston, so I hope that you join us to celebrate. We gave the US premiere of Bach's St. Matthew Passion in the United States in 1879. So that is a work that has really great importance to the Handel and Haydn Society's history. One wonders how it would have sounded in 1879, but that's another lecture one day. Now I would like to introduce Dr. Christoph Wolff, who's the Adams University Research Professor at Harvard University and on graduate faculty of the Juilliard School, former president and director of the Bach Archive in Leipzig. He has published widely on the history of music from 15th to 20th century, notably on Bach and Mozart. So I would like now to welcome Dr. Wolff.
Good evening. Bach is a bit older than the Handel and Haydn Society, but he was an exact contemporary of Handel. Why the society wasn't named Bach, Handel and Haydn Society? It's easy to explain, because the public presence of Handel preceded that of Bach by a considerable margin. Now, I need to explain the title, The Grand Passion, because I deliberately left out St. Matthew. This is not my invention, and it's also not the invention of some public relations agency. It goes back to Bach's time, indeed, to his composing study and library, where he kept his performing materials. I show you a picture. You don't need to read it, but what you see is a portion of the double bass part of the St. Matthew Passion. And it serves as a reminder that in Bach's time, the performances had to be prepared not only by rehearsing the vocal and instrumental parts, but prior to that, the material had to be copied out from the composer's score. We keep forgetting this because today everything has been published and is available readily in print. In Bach's time, everything was basically a premiere and had to be prepared. And his students and family members were the ones to prepare this material. But this is not the reason I show you this picture. You see something written at the bottom of the page, which is upside down. But I turn around the page and you see what's written there, and in enlargement you see the words zur Großpassion. Translated, belonging to the Grand Passion. This is in the hand of Anna Magdalena Bach, Bach's wife, who also served as copyist, assistant, and librarian. And apparently, this sheet got lost somewhere in the shovel. And so the library had to be kept in good order. So she made a note, she immediately recognized the piece, zur großen Passion, so she made sure that it was shelved in the proper way. And this is an interesting little detail, not only the fact that we get a little feel for Anna Magdalena's way of pronouncing Passion with a B, with a Saxon soft P. The more important thing is that it refers to the grand passion, which everyone in the Bach household knew what it was referring to. The biggest piece that Bach ever wrote, and the biggest passion that had ever been composed until the 1720s. So it is really a work of unprecedented dimensions in terms of size and also complexity. It marks, in fact, the culmination point of Bach's production of sacred music in the first Leipzig years, where he put together a repertoire of cantatas and also festive pieces. The St. John Passion was composed before the St. Matthew Passion and the Magnificat and some other larger scale works, but nothing of the scale of the St. Matthew Passion. So whenever there was a reference, now this year we do the big Passion, this was it. And I think it's important to realize that Bach himself was intensely aware of the historical standing of this work as something that had no precedent. Now, let's briefly talk about the size from the point of view of performance, because that is what immediately becomes noticeable. It is composed for double choir and double orchestra, which also had never been done before. There is a reason for it, which we'll turn to at a later point. But in order to mount a performance of the St. Matthew Passion in Bach's time, and Bach's forces were relatively small, he needed some 50 to 60 performers, singers and instrumentalists. For an ordinary cantata, he had about 20 to 30 performers. So this was really twice as big. And the musicians' gallery in the St. Thomas Church, the only church where he could mount a performance, not the other church, the St. Nicholas's Church. So that gallery was completely filled. And at one point in the later 30s, when Bach reperformed the piece, he had to expand the gallery. We have the records for that. So it's a very large group. And don't make the mistake of looking at it from a 19th and 20th century perspective, where we often have a stage full of musicians. But at the time when Bach composed the piece, think of where he came from the 17th century tradition, where you had 4, 5, 10, maybe 12 singers and instrumentalists. So it is a very big deal that he now comes up with a work that requires so many performers. There is one other aspect, and that is the musical passion. And it started with the St. John Passion, which Bach performed at the end of his first year as cantor in Leipzig. The annual Passion performance was the musical high point for the musical life in the city of Leipzig, and actually in other cities as well. This, of course, is a completely different situation from the perspective of the social structure of the cities in Germany at the time. But it is important to realize that the church was crowded. With the St. Thomas Church had a seating capacity of over 2,000. So it was a major event attended by lots of people. So Bach actually turned this into the major event of the year. It had not been previously the case that the Passion performance with instruments and choir took place in the Good Friday Vespers service. This service is a special service that was introduced during the Reformation in the 16th century, early 16th century, and it was designed by Martin Luther as a service of hymn singing with readings of the Passion story from the Bible and a sermon in between. So this was the practice until the early 18th century, and Kuhnau, Bach's predecessor, at the very end of his career, mounted the first oratorio style performance in 1721 when he was in his final year. When Bach arrived in Leipzig in 1723, there had been 2 years of an interim when there were no Passion performances. So Bach really established this musical service on Good Friday in the afternoon at 1 o'clock. Kuhnau's work had been lost, so we don't really know what it looks like, but it was definitely on a much smaller scale, as we can tell from some fragments that have survived. But Bach really started the oratorio style performance in 1724 at the end of his first year of service. There is a reason for Kuhnau to start in 1721 with this oratorio style Passion performance. And that was, as is often the case, there was money. And a rich widow endowed the Good Friday Vespers service for the first time in 1721. There had been some desire on Leipzigers to have a representative musical passion for almost a decade, because the competing commercial city of Hamburg had started with the oratorio style Passion, and this Hamburg town councillor, Barthold Heinrich Brockes, was the one who created the first libretto done after the 4 Gospels. And you see the title page here, and on the second picture I show you that it was performed in various versions, compositions by Kaiser, the leader of the Hamburg Opera, by Telemann, by Handel, and by Mattheson. So this is representative of the popularity of the Brockes libretto, and Bach could not skip it. We'll get to it in a moment. There were at least 40 compositional settings of the Brockes Passion eventually. Bach never set it to music, but he, in his later years, did perform the Handel Brockes Passion in Leipzig. Now here you see a quick survey of the Passion performances in the first years of Leipzig in Bach's time. After the Kuhnau performance of 1721, it really started in 1724 with Bach's St. John. He probably wanted to do the St. Matthew Passion in 1726, but it wasn't quite ready. So it was first performed in 1727, and then in a revised and slightly expanded version in 1736, and with probably 2 or 3 performances after that. So Bach did not perform the piece very frequently. Now, the influence of the Brockes libretto can be seen in the St. John Passion, where Bach uses a number of texts from the Brockes Passion, but the St. John Passion has a hodgepodge libretto. It has no librettist. It is a concoction of various texts taken from collections of religious poetry, and hymns from the hymn book. So that was essentially it. But with the St. Matthew Passion, Bach now turns to a real libretto, and it becomes a very artful design that he puts together for the St. Matthew Passion with the help of his favorite poet in Leipzig, that is Christian Friedrich Henrici, called Picander. And here you can see in the title page of the St. Matthew Passion, Per Dominum Henrici alias Picander, Musica di J.S. Bach. It's the only piece of vocal music where Bach gives credit to the poet. And that is not insignificant. It is clear that Bach and Henrici, Picander, really collaborated on this piece in a very specific and fruitful way. I will show you some examples later on which really explain the degree of collaboration. Now, what Picander took over from Brockes is the idea to assign the reflective poetry to two allegorical figures, the daughter of Zion on the one hand and the faithful on the other. This is an interesting idea because the daughter of Zion is referring to Jerusalem, or the people of Jerusalem. This refers to the witnesses, the people who were there when the story happened. And the faithful are the contemporary believers. So the idea of Brockes was to bring the past into the present and have this kind of dialogue. But they never sing simultaneously or have specific roles. That was the idea of Bach and Picander, to really bring the two together and have a double choir, one representing the daughters of Zion and one the faithful. Each group, each choir has its own soloists. Today you wouldn't see that because, for economic reasons, they wouldn't or couldn't hire so many soloists. But for Bach, that was no problem. It was the idea, and you at least have to be aware of it because it is essential for understanding the nature of the piece that emphasizes its timelessness by bringing together figures of the past and the contemporary believers, and that makes this piece particularly special. So when you look at the elements of the structure of the St. Matthew Passion, you see three components. One is the reflective poetry by Picander that is distributed among the two choirs and the related soloists. Then there is the biblical narrative in dialogue form. Choir 1 has all the biblical people like Jesus, Pilate, and also the evangelist. And choir 2 for sound effect is used for the crowd choruses when we have the disciples, the priests, and the people. And then we have the hymns from the Lutheran hymn book as ecclesiastical reflections. These are hymns from the 16th and 17th centuries, so it's not contemporary hymn poetry, so it's another traditional material. So by using this ecclesiastical poetry, Bach draws in the biblical narrative, which goes back 1700 years, and then the chorales from the 16th and the 17th century with the modern poetry and the modern music of the 1720s, that is the music of the day. Now, if you look at the way it is put together, I've given you this scheme. You can't really see the details, but you can see in these 3 columns on the left-hand side is the poetry by Picander, which really structures the piece. If you look at the headings, it says, when the woman anointed Jesus. He does not print in the libretto the entire biblical passage because he assumes people know what it is. So it's the scene of the anointment in Bethany. And then when Jesus kept the Passover is the reference to the Passover meal. So these are the scenes, and then included here at the center the biblical narrative, and on the right hand then the ecclesiastical reflections on the part of the chorales that are sung by the choirs together, in fact as representing the contemporary Christian Lutheran congregation. What you see here, of course, is the enormous dimension that is created by using creatively these components and having them alternate, and also having them exchange all kinds of instrumental colors and textures. So there is a great deal of variety. We have an oboe solo, we have a violin solo, and so the degree of emotional and expressive detail is unprecedented in the St. Matthew Passion. It goes well beyond any other large-scale work that Bach ever designed. Now, we don't have that much time, but I would like to give you 2 examples in order to make you understand what is so particularly special about the St. Matthew Passion and what makes it different from, say, an ordinary cantata. And a good way of making the point is listening to the first biblical passage, the narrative that opens the piece after the opening chorale. It is the following text straight from the Bible. The evangelist, when Jesus had finished his speech, he said to his disciples, "You know that in 2 days it will be Passover, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." Bach differentiates very clearly between the presentation of the narrative. The evangelist presents it in free declamatory speech. And Bach has a string accompaniment, and also his declamatory style is different. He speaks in elevated form, and at times, for example, when it comes to the institution of the Last Supper, the communion, it is ceremonial. And if I play for you this first brief recitative, pay attention to the difference between the declamatory styles. And it is not just the strings that make a difference in the presentation mode, but it is the way Jesus speaks. And for example, the words "to be crucified," gekreuziget werde, this is of course the central word, and that is presented in a way that foreshadows the suffering. So there is the element of giving the recitative expressive meaning, which a mere narrative wouldn't have. So the string accompaniment helps to really enhance the way the language is presented. First example.
Da Jesus diese Rede vollendet hatte, sprach zu seinen Jüngern: wisset, dass nach 2 Tagen Ostern wird, und des Menschen Sohn wird überantwortet werden, dass gekreuzigt werde.
So if you pursue this throughout the entire Passion, you will see only one spot, you will hear only one spot, where the strings do not accompany Jesus, and that is for the last words. Lama, lama asaftani, God, you have forsaken me. God becomes man. And at that point, the string accompaniment is dropped. So Jesus is treated like everyone else on stage. By the way, a small detail. Today, we usually have Jesus assigned a special singing role. This was not the case in Bach's time. The Jesus also sang the bass arias of the first choir, because if Jesus would have been separated from the rest of the group and sung only the words of Jesus, it would have been operatic. And that was against the idea. So Jesus is singing the words of Jesus, but he is not representing the biblical person. So that's an important detail. Now, the biggest piece of monumental dimensions is the opening chorus. And I think this, in a particular way, helps us to understand the artful composition of both the libretto and the music. If you look at the way the text is constructed, you see that the two allegorical parties engage in a dialogue. Come, you daughters, help me lament. Behold, whom? The bridegroom. So there are the ones who know it and the ones who don't and who need to be told. So this kind of dialogue works through the entire opening movement. So it brings everyone into the game, so to speak. And then on top of this dialogue of the two choruses, there is a third choir that is placed on the opposite end of the church, the altar side of the church. The musicians' gallery is on the west side. So from up front, from the altar side, resounds a chorale, and that is the German Agnus Dei, O Lamm Gottes unschuldig, O Lamb of God, innocent, slaughtered on the trunk of the cross. This is taken from the 16th century hymnal. It's a chorale from the late 1520s, but this was the starting point for Picander, and it's clear that Bach said to him, you work this into the poem because I want this multidimensional opening of the piece. And if you look at the way the poem is constructed, you can see that the words of the chorale, the key words, really trigger the way the poetry is designed. So you see in the chorale, O Lamb of God is the first line, and behold him how as a lamb. So then the next line has geduldig. So it's geduld, and here patience, all times found patient. And look where at our guilt all sin you has borne. So it's integrated in a very tight way, and the two texts inspire each other. And you listen to the piece, you don't really recognize it because normally in the text librettos, you don't see it the way I can show it to you on this diagram. But it is important to see this multidimensional aspect of Bach, and in this way, he really was aided to a considerable extent by Picander, his collaborator. Now, I give you the piece, the opening, and it takes 9 minutes, but I play only the first two until the first line of the chorale, and you get the idea. It then moves on, and it also is interesting from the following point of view. The opening chorus key is E minor, a very dark E minor. The chorale is in G major, so we have a modal contrast. The positive chorale from the altar, and then the mourning chorus on the gallery. So this kind of tension at the beginning of the piece, with the major mode chorale on top of it, is not resolved until Easter, because 3 days later, you know, the cantata with trumpets in D major or C major would present the kind of reference that Bach builds into the opening chorus in a suggestive way. And if you know what Bach's intention was, then I think you can enjoy the piece much more. And also, if you think of the tonality, it's not very difficult to understand. If you have two modes, major and minor mode, combined in one piece, the piece ends in C minor. So it moves from the sharp keys to the flat keys, and in between we have all kinds of keys. It's a meandering through a world of emotions, because what we hear in the St. Matthew Passion are expressions of pain and suffering, of sadness, but also of love, and then of rage, of meanness and intrigue. It's a wide variety of musical expressions that Bach, the composer, is trying to translate into the appropriate musical language, so that it is reaching not just the heads of the people, but the hearts of the people. And that makes music so special. No preacher can achieve in any sermon, if it's rhetorical, as brilliant as it can be, then what the musician can achieve by making music that immediately speaks to the heart. Now, let's listen to the opening section of the St. Matthew Passion. It's a funeral procession, basically, that moves up Mount Zion, which you hear when you listen to the bass. dialogue. Thank you. I'll stop here. You will hear, I hope, the piece next week. I didn't want to anticipate too much, but if you get the opening right, you enjoy the piece in a much deeper way. Thank you.
This question is for Christoph. When Bach went to Hamburg, did he encounter the Bacchus Passions?
No, because he was in Hamburg in November, and that was not the time for performances of the Passion. And I think he knew the piece or the libretto well before he went to Hamburg in 1720. And when he was first in Hamburg in 1700 and 1701 and 1702, the Bacchus libretto had not been written.
So his encounters with Mattheson and Kaiser would not have
That's correct.
led him to see the
No,
libretto?
no, I think he was interested in the concept, in the poetic quality of the Bacchus libretto, and he also was interested in Handel's setting of the work. So he performed it in Leipzig in the early 1740s.
But not ever the Telemann?
No.
So he didn't know any of the other versions?
Well, he knew Telemann very well, but he decided not to present a performance of it.
Hi, Professor Wolff. This is a question for you. I actually took your Bach course when I was an undergraduate here, and I'm really happy to have another opportunity to learn from you, so thank you.
Thank you.
I was interested in what you said about the key that the St. Matthew Passion is the opening piece is composed in, and how there's that interplay between the major of the chorale and the minor of the poetry. And I'm curious as to whether there are any musical, thematical carryovers between the St. Matthew Passion and the chorale or the cantata that would have been performed that Easter for the 1727 and 1736.
Okay, well, let me briefly try to answer the question without going into the complexity of music theory. But if you think of the opening chorus as juxtaposing E minor and G major, now the two keys are related because G major is the relative major key. So they work well together. And therefore, within the opening chorus, Bach makes use of G major for the entire middle passage of the piece. So the movement is constructed like a da capo aria, so in A-B-A form, and the centerpiece is in G major. But the key of G is foreshadowed by the chorale at the beginning and also by the conclusion of the chorale. So the contrast is deliberate, but it is very organic, so to speak. Now, we do know which cantatas Bach performed for most of the Easter Sunday morning services. but we do not see, or I do not see, any direct relationship between the music for Easter and the music for Good Friday. It's a very stark contrast in every respect because you have on Easter Sunday invariably a whole battery of trumpets and timpani, so it's loud music. The Good Friday Passion, even though you have lots of performers on stage, is essentially a quiet, reflective piece. And the only passage where you have some noise is when thunder and the thunder is breaking up at the end of the first part, where Bach imitates an earthquake. There is reference to the earthquake in the Bible, but Bach uses it effectively for dramatic effect because otherwise the music would be too subdued. So he has a good sense of drama in his way to keep the attention of his listeners. But Easter is a completely different story, and there are no thematic relationships. Also, the Easter hymns are different from the Passion hymns.
Thank you very much.
You can also, you can head up to that one too.
Is this working?
Yeah.
Oh, it's working? Okay. Professor Wolff, no? It's not working? Yeah. You mentioned the big scale of the St. Matthew Passion, the grand Passion. And I have heard and saw the performance in London in the church and in Jordan Hall, and I can see the difference between watching it in a small place and watching it in a big place with a lot more people. I wonder, in the performance that Bach performed, the two performances there, and then much later when Mendelssohn revived it, other performances, what are the scales of this performance? Do they have two orchestras and two choruses and a boys' choir in the middle? Are they like that, or are they smaller?
No, well, when Mendelssohn performed the piece in the Singakademie in 1829, which was about 100 years after the original performance in Leipzig, and it was the first modern public performance of the piece as far as we can tell. And he used larger forces than Bach had at his disposal. The orchestra was also a bit bigger, and we do not know the details of the way he handled the third choir. It might have been boys from the cathedral choir, which he later led, but we do not know. We only know that the two choirs he conducted, the vocal choirs, were mixed choirs with female voices and male voices, very different from what Bach used in Leipzig.
What about Bach's performances in Leipzig and when the two performances you mentioned, are they smaller scale?
Well, I think if we put the figures together, he had two choirs with each about 15 or 16 singers in it. Okay, yeah. So that adds up to about 30. That's it. Okay. That's fairly small.
Yeah, and it's also in a church, not in a
in
big,
the church,
hall.
Absolutely,
yeah.
in the church, yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
St. Thomas Church is a big church.
Yeah. I watched it in the St. Martin in the Field, which is a very good church in London. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Wolff. The chorale tunes and the passions and cantatas, if we look in the original sources, they have all kinds of neat rhythms and halves and wholes and neat bumpy contours, and even in the Gesangbücher today in the Lutheran Church, they're that way. But in the cantatas and the passions, they're all, Bach sets them all in 4/4 square, and that's why they've come down to us even in Episcopal and Methodist hymnals. Did the people in the congregation in the Thomaskirche sing them in the original interesting meter form, or in the 4/4 way that we know them today, principally from Bach, if we know?
Well, they were certainly not singing along with the choir, because that would have been very disruptive. Also, Bach departs significantly from the melodies in the hymnals, and also jumps up and down with terms in terms of the pitches. He very often intones a hymn very high or very low for the sake of expressivity. So in the hymnals, they were all in a 4/square way. So the little melismatic aspects that he also includes, again for the sake of emphasis, in not only the top part, but primarily in the inner part and in the bass part, they help to really make the 4-part plain chorale setting very flexible and also highly expressive. So that's a difference between what the congregation sings in very simple, unembellished ways to the version that Bach uses in his cantatas and passions.
So they would have sung the original form in its original meter, with no harmony.
No.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
There's a question up here.
To what extent did Bach annotate his music in terms of the speed and the volume, loud, soft, fast, slow? I've read that very little of that with him.
We actually have in the St. Matthew Passion dynamic indications as nowhere else. We have references to forte, fortissimo, to mezzo forte, to piano and pianissimo. And it all comes together in the concluding chorus. Wir setzen uns mit Tränen nieder. The final chorus has all kinds of echo effects in there. And Bach is very careful in presenting dynamic shades. We have no other sample in any other work that goes to the degree of differentiation as Bach did in the St. Matthew Passion.
Just one more question. Where was this manuscript for that 100 years, and how did Mendelssohn come upon it?
Oh, Mendelssohn, the piece was not printed at the time. Mendelssohn's grandmother gave it to the 12-year-old Mendelssohn for Christmas in 1822. The Mendelssohns, that is Abraham Mendelssohn, Mendelssohn's father, converted to Protestantism in that year, and the grandmother was very upset about it. But she made peace with the son and his family by making this gift of a Bach score to the gifted Felix. Apparently, we do not have an accompanying letter. She intensely realized that the St. Matthew Passion was a Christian work of art. And apparently it meant that Judaism and Christianity are bridged through the music of Bach.
Professor Christoph. So I have one question. In your talk, you deliberately mentioned that the Jesus are not seen by a dedicated person, otherwise it will be operatic. And why does Bach does not want to turn this piece into an operatic or opera-like pieces?
Well, there is a difference between a church and an opera house. And I think that is important, not only to Bach, but also to his listeners. They did not want to turn the music gallery into an opera stage. So, there is the kind of drama that you find in opera, but the visualization of the drama. I mean, we do not have any scenery. Everything is really abstract. You don't see anything. In fact, the musicians perform in the back of the listeners. You don't really see, and there are columns in the church, and there is a blurred and a view here and there, and lots of obstacles. So seeing the music was not important. Of course, in an opera, it's very important to see what's happening on stage. In sacred music, it is what you hear, and therefore what the music projects is even more challenging to the composer than an operatic staging, where what happens on stage is really demonstrating what the music means. But if you do not see anything, the music and its meaning has to be communicated in a very persuasive way. And that is part of the greatness in Bach's compositional art, that he has a wonderful way to communicate meaning through his language of music.
Thank you.
I think we can talk about this for ever and ever, but I believe that we have about reached the limit for tonight, and I thank you very much.
Thank you.